This 1901 map displays the largest empire in human history. At this time, British territory spanned roughly 1/4 of the Earth's total landmass. Within these borders, the British government ruled over 400 million people. Because these territories formed a continuous chain across every inhabited continent, the famous phrase was literally true. Somewhere within these borders, the sun was always shining. Yet this global dominance is a historical paradox. The entire system originated from a single, small island kingdom on the edge of Europe. In the late 15th and 16th centuries, England was a small, isolated power on the periphery of European trade. While England remained focused on internal affairs, Spain and Portugal were already building massive overseas empires across the Americas and the Atlantic. England's early maritime expeditions often failed to locate new trade routes, leaving the nation as a late arrival to global exploration. Unable to rely on the first-mover advantage of discovery, England instead developed a uniquely efficient, privatized system to extract the world's wealth. In 1600, Queen Elizabeth I granted a royal charter to a new private venture, the East India Company. This organization functioned as a private corporation, prioritizing profit for its shareholders over traditional state military objectives. The company's strategy involved establishing direct maritime trading posts across Asia, specifically targeting the highly lucrative markets of India. British merchants successfully negotiated the exchange of textiles, spices, tea, and silk with local kingdoms. This privatized trade channeled an unprecedented volume of raw wealth into Britain, providing the initial fuel for the imperial engine. These trade profits transformed London into a global financial center, where banks and investors accumulated massive fortunes. This capital created a self-sustaining cycle. Corporate wealth was reinvested into a massive navy, which secured the routes for more wealth. The Royal Navy grew into a specialized tool designed to protect these trade routes and seize control of the oceans from rival powers. Naval dominance allowed Britain to build permanent towns, ports, and plantations throughout North America and the Caribbean. A triangular trade network soon connected Europe, Africa, and the Americas, circulating raw materials and manufactured products on a global scale. This combination of reinvested wealth and maritime strength made the British system difficult for traditional land-based empires to match. By the mid-1700s, British expansion had brought colonial borders into direct, repeated conflict with French territories in North America and India. This friction triggered the 7 Years' War, a global struggle that served as the turning point for colonial supremacy. Britain defeated France across multiple theaters, gaining control over vast territories in both North America and India. This victory transformed Britain's presence in India from a network of corporate trading posts into a system of military governance. By integrating naval power, global trade, and military conquest, Britain had become the dominant colonial power of its era. The empire continued to expand, with ships carrying the Union Jack to Africa, Asia, Australia, and the Pacific. This expansion was built on 4 pillars: vast naval superiority, global trade networks, unyielding military strength, and industrial innovation. But governing a quarter of the Earth from a single island created massive logistical and political strain. Across these vast territories, resistance was growing, and local revolutions were beginning to challenge British authority. The pressure at one specific node, the colonies in North America, was about to ignite a historical rupture that would soon sever Britain's oldest colonial ties. Following the First World War, the British Empire reached its absolute peak. It controlled nearly a quarter of the Earth's land surface and governed approximately 400 million people. Yet, 3 centuries earlier, England was simply an isolated island on the fringes of Europe. While Spain and Portugal dominated the age of exploration by building massive overseas territories and commanding the oceans, the English fleet was small, and their early attempts to secure new sea routes to Asia repeatedly failed. The shift occurred in the year 1600. Queen Elizabeth I granted a royal charter to a private, joint stock venture known as the East India Company. Rather than deploying a state-funded military to conquer foreign land, the Crown delegated the risk to a corporation. Early English expansion was driven not by conquest, but entirely by the pursuit of shareholder profit. The company established trading posts across Asia, exchanging goods for Indian textiles, spices, silk, and tea. The immense profits flowing back into London allowed Britain to heavily invest in its fleet, eventually building the strongest naval force in the world. Protected by this newly powerful Royal Navy, British merchants and settlers established a sprawling network of towns and lucrative plantations across North America and the Caribbean. Following a decisive victory over France in the 7 Years' War, Britain secured undisputed control over these Atlantic territories. Governing this growing domain, however, proved difficult. The British government began imposing heavy taxes on its 13 American colonies to recoup war debts, while refusing to grant the colonists any political representation in Parliament. Colonial frustration boiled over into armed conflict in 1775. After 8 years of fighting in the American Revolutionary War, the United States officially secured its independence. Losing the American colonies severed the core transatlantic trade network that had enriched the Crown for decades. European rivals looked at the resulting financial hole and concluded that Britain's era of global dominance had permanently ended. This map illustrates Britain's strategic response. Shifting trade from the Atlantic, the empire redirected aggressively east. Here, the East India Company mutated into an occupying army. Following victory at Plassey, the corporation steadily swallowed local kingdoms, absorbing almost the entire Indian subcontinent. But a private company of merchants was never designed to govern a population of that size. The breaking point arrived with the Indian Rebellion of 1857, a massive and bloody uprising against corporate rule. In response, the British government officially dissolved the East India Company and assumed direct control. India was formally integrated into the state apparatus, becoming recognized as the jewel in the crown of the British Empire. The defeat in America had forced Britain to seek wealth elsewhere. By redirecting their military and economic machinery east, they captured a territory with vastly superior population numbers and resources, effectively upgrading their geopolitical leverage. At the exact moment Britain consolidated control over India, the Industrial Revolution began multiplying the nation's output. Factories rapidly mass-produced textiles, steel, and weapons. Heavy industry provided the physical means to exploit these lands. Steamships and railway networks allowed engineers to carve paths straight through difficult terrain, transporting massive quantities of extracted raw materials from deep inland directly to coastal ports. Because the British economy relied heavily on Indian wealth, protecting the fastest sea route to the subcontinent became an absolute priority. That meant maintaining an iron grip on the Suez Canal in Egypt. Fearing rival European nations might cut off this vital artery, Britain expanded its borders southward. This strategic panic catalyzed the scramble for Africa, resulting in the aggressive annexation of territories stretching all the way from Egypt down to South Africa. Technology allowed administrators to coordinate shipping schedules, troop movements, and financial transactions across oceans. What began as scattered coastal trading posts had evolved into a highly integrated global extraction machine. The wealth drawn from this machine made London the undisputed financial center of the globe. British banks financed railroads, ports, and foreign governments on nearly every continent. This chart compares the total landmass and population of the British Empire against the rest of the world. By its peak, Britain held roughly 25% of Earth's land surface, enforcing the reality that the sun literally never set on its territories. But governing a quarter of the globe required immense capital. Stationing military garrisons, maintaining colonial infrastructure, and policing borders thousands of miles away drained the treasury. Reaching its maximum territorial extent stretched the British military and administrative apparatus to its absolute limit. The empire's vast size had quietly become its greatest financial and structural liability. Simultaneously, the people living under British rule began pushing back. Across the colonies, indigenous populations organized vast nationalist movements, openly rejecting foreign occupation and demanding self-governance. Attempting to suppress these widespread, coordinated independence movements required continuous military deployment, further exhausting an already strained British economy. Then, the geopolitical order fractured entirely. 2 world wars would soon consume Europe, permanently depleting Britain's wealth and destroying its capacity to project power overseas. the same relentless drive for expansion and resource extraction that allowed a small island to dominate the globe stretched its borders until they snapped. The engine that built the empire ultimately guaranteed its collapse. Looking at this map of the globe in 1920, the territories highlighted in red show a single political entity that controlled nearly 1/4 of the Earth's land and governed over 400 million people. But if we spin the map back to where this expansion began, the entire system originated from a single, remarkably small island kingdom on the edge of Europe. In the late 15th and 16th centuries, Spain and Portugal dominated the age of exploration by building massive overseas empires. England arrived to the global stage late. Locked out of the initial rush for new territories and struggling through early failures, the kingdom developed an aggressive strategy to break into global trade. That strategy materialized in 1600, when Queen Elizabeth I signed a royal charter granting a monopoly to a private trading organization, the East India Company. The company dispatched merchants across Asia, establishing trading posts and exchanging European goods for highly profitable Indian textiles, spices, tea, and silk. The astronomical wealth generated by these corporate operations provided the exact capital Britain needed to heavily invest in the Royal Navy. Armed with a massive, modernized fleet, British forces defeated France in the 7 Years' War, securing control over vast new territories across North America and India. The foundation of this global network was built by combining immense private corporate profits with absolute maritime firepower. By the late 18th century, heavy taxation sparked a massive rebellion in North America. The resulting Revolutionary War ended in 1783 with the absolute loss of the 13 American colonies. Rather than retreating after losing this massive landmass, Britain pivoted its focus eastward. The East India Company was used to systematically conquer and absorb the Indian subcontinent. Following the Indian Rebellion of 1857, the British government dissolved the company and assumed direct control. India, containing staggering resources and population, became the jewel in the crown of British holdings. To protect the maritime routes connecting London to these valuable eastern assets, Britain threw itself into the scramble for Africa, capturing vital geographic choke points like the Suez Canal to guarantee swift passage. Losing their most famous colonial possession forced the state to construct a far larger, more strategic network across the Eastern Hemisphere. To physically administer and extract wealth from these sprawling territories, Britain relied on the mechanical engine of the Industrial Revolution. British factories began mass-producing textiles, steel, machinery, and weapons at a volume that rival nations simply could not match. Simultaneously, new industrial transport technologies shrank the globe. Steamships and railways meant that British military and commercial power could reach distant colonies in a matter of weeks rather than months. The sheer volume of raw materials flowing in and manufactured goods shipping out concentrated immense wealth in London, establishing it as the financial capital of the world. By the period immediately following the First World War, this system had expanded British control to roughly 1/4 of the Earth's total landmass. Industrialization allowed a single island to defy the natural limits of its geography, converting global trade routes into a highly efficient closed-loop system of extraction and profit. Even as it reached its maximum territorial footprint, the empire was eroding from within. Millions of colonial soldiers had died on the battlefield during World War I, and the sheer cost of victory resulted in massive national debt. Across Asia and Africa, nationalist movements recognized this vulnerability and organized intense resistance campaigns demanding freedom from London's rule. The outbreak of World War II pushed the weakened state to its absolute limit. German bombing campaigns devastated British cities, and the country exhausted virtually its entire remaining treasury to defeat Nazi Germany. The extraordinary financial and military cost of the conflict meant that the act of winning the Second World War permanently bankrupted and dismantled the British Empire. The fatal blow to the imperial structure arrived in 1947, when decades of relentless political struggle led by figures like Mahatma Gandhi finally forced Britain to grant India its independence. As this map shows, losing the jewel in the crown triggered a rapid domino effect across the globe. Over the following decades, territories across Africa, the Caribbean, and the Pacific broke away to become sovereign nations, including Ghana, Nigeria, Kenya, Malaysia, and Jamaica. London systematically recognized these new governments, formally transferring political power and dissolving the administration that had governed them. The empire left behind a massive structural footprint, exporting parliamentary democracy, global railway networks, and the English language to every inhabited continent. At the same time, this expansion relied on systemic economic exploitation, the drawing of artificial borders, and profound racial inequality that still impact these regions today. The total dissolution of history's largest empire did not result in immediate global stability. Its collapse created a massive power vacuum, instantly pulling the United States and the Soviet Union into a bitter global standoff.